Well, gents, we're here to talk about making extension leads for your Bird 43. I got ahead of myself. Let me grab another visual prop. So this is what the inside of your Bird 43 looks like. It's your line section. Here's the front side, of course. Your line section and your meter movement. Well, in here we can clearly see that our line section attaches down here with this little flat 90-degree coupler, which sucks, but it's cool in the same breath. And then this is just 50 ohm coax. It's usually rg-316 that goes from here to the back of the meter. Well, listen, I have this friend of mine, his name is Bob, specifically Bullet Bob, and he makes really cool stuff. When he does an install, he does not spare any expense, and he likes to have really cool custom stuff. Well, when I was down there this last time, we spent 2 days taking his meter systems apart, looking at them, going through them and making them work again. Because his extension cables that thread onto his line sections from here to here were all broken in different places. And it comes from the rg-316 that is solid core coax that they used in the extension cables. Now, the other thing we did is we looked at his base antenna metering system, okay? And I did a whole YouTube video on that system that I put together for him. Now, the Bird, here it is. This is what I need. All Bird 43s, 1 5/8, even the 3-inch line sections have the same adapter on them, okay? Well, when I was down there, I was getting really pissed off with the solid core coax. I'm like, Bob, I've got some way cooler tech at home. Let me hook you up with that. So I packed up the meter system, I brought it home, I completely rebuilt it, put a different peak kit in it, got everything working perfectly for him, and then I built him all new extensions that went off of his, master control panel that went down to his line sections. And I went ahead and I did it with stuff that I thought would be more ergonomically correct for him, okay? I don't know about you, but every day I get a little bit older, and every day it gets a little bit harder to get my fingers to twist together. And I really noticed that for certain people, not specifically pointing a finger at Bob or anybody, but for certain people to get them little Bird 43 connectors to screw on really is a pain in the ass. It's a pain. See, this thing was designed to be remoted out the hop. Most Bird 43s come with about 1 foot, maybe 2 feet of coax on the inside. So you can take the back off, take the 2 screws out the front, and this pops out. Now this is nothing new. Everything I'm going to show you here is nothing new. This is simply me documenting this so that you all out there in YouTuber land have a video reference on how to set this up for yourself, okay? How this works is this has to be solid core for this fitting to work. You can make it work with stranded, but you got to solder it, and it's a lot of work. There is a spring that's on the inside of this. It's under tension. The whole inside of this cup's got nylon in it. There's a reducer and a little collet piece that you fold your shield over, and then you got to push the solid center conductor through that spring, and that spring makes contact with this pin. Well, imagine you've got this stuffed on the back of your amp in the mobile, and you've got 3 different layers of cheaters on, and you're trying to figure out how to get this to thread on, and your fingers might be shaking a little bit. Getting that to thread up kind of sucks. Well, we're not trying to get this mounted inside the Bird 43 cabinet anymore. So I said, let's make this a little bit more applicable for my friend Bob and make it a little bit easier on him by providing him with a little bit different fitting. Now, I learned a million years ago, because there's this guy out of New York that sells line sections and meter movements. He literally uses the cheapest coax money can buy. No offense, that's what you're going to do in that line of business. And he would take a PL259 connector and he'd shave down the center pin. But the trick to the thing is this. This has the same thread and pitch set is a regular SO239 connector. See that? This threads on snugly. It has the same amount of surface contact, but it doesn't matter which line section you put it on. They're all the same. Now, Coaxial Dynamics, on the other hand, they have their own fitting, which is proprietary to them. This is just after what they consider to be the 7/8 connector, the 7/8 line section. Theirs are just Bird. Coaxial Dynamics is the same as Bird on the 7/8, but when you go up, they got a bigger fitting. So this trick won't work for that. But I found, me personally, that this makes it a lot easier for some of my guys to be able to thread this thing on. So, once again, I'm not creating anything and I'm not showing you anything like revolutionary or new. I'm simply showing you a trick. Well, let's fast forward to present date. Bob put all that stuff on his station. It all worked flawlessly. He was really impressed. He really enjoyed it. And it was easy for him to get his fingers on, and it was really easy for him to thread things off. He has decided he's got his beautiful Cadillac Escalade, which is just breathtaking. I like to tongue-in-cheek say that Bob inspired my Suburban build. They're roughly the same year. Mine's an all-black Suburban, of course. His is an all-white Escalade. And he went and he took his bird meters and had them mounted in his dash piece, and then had them make custom fiberglass holders. So the bird meters, when you're sitting in the truck, you're looking at them and they're tilted towards you, but they're on the passenger side of the vehicle. And then he put the switch in the remote bird kit down in the glove box. All he's got to do is reach over and flip his glove box open and flip a switch. And he's got peak, forward, and reflect, the whole 9 yards. He's doing the same thing with this new truck he's building. Well, Bob decided to reach out and says, hey, I don't know any place that I can go buy those really cool jumpers that you made for me for my base. Can you make me some more? To which I said, of course. This is 50 ohm coax. So's this here. This is 50 ohm coax. This is stranded center conductor, and it's a stick-a-billionth the size of this, and it's a whole lot more flexible, and it's aircraft rated, so it's designed to be put in a high vibration environment. It's designed to be run up underneath through the floorboard or through a door or around a corner that's going to flex 300 times. This is solid core. This sucks. This works good if you put it in place and there's no vibration and it never moves. So I thought I would come out here, and as I assembled these, I would show you a step-by-step instructional video on 1, how to save yourself a little bit of money, and 2, how to build a superior coax jumper for your meter setup. Okay, where you save the money is in the cost of the fitting. That's about $2.50 to $3 at the time of shooting this video. With rampant inflation the way it is today, we know that this is going to go up, everything is going to go up in cost, but this connector here, this is a legit Amphenol connector, is about $2.50 to $3 a piece. This connector here, which is not a Chinesium knockoff, actually made by Bird, is about $25. Be aware of fake connectors. The market is flooded with fake Chinesium knockoff garbage, which is nowhere as good as the actual real deal thing. It might be cheaper to buy that cheap Chinese garbage from somebody on Amazon, eBay, whatever, but your best bet's really to go spend the money where it counts. Go to a company like Max Gain Systems or MGS4U. It's MGS4U. MGS4 and then the letter U. Max Gain Systems for You is what that stands for. And go spend some money. That's where I get all of these connectors from. Okay, I buy all my PL259s from him. I buy my SO239s, PL259 flange mounts for my amps. Everything, I buy it from them because, well, the quality's higher and I'm willing to pay a couple dollars more to get the better quality. This is the rg-174 reducer for 316. That's slick. This is cut out of brass, and then it is nickel and then silver plated, which means it is fully solderable. So the connector itself, the Amphenol connector, is about $3, and the reducer is about $1.50 to $2. So you're in this entire setup here for about $5. Okay? The 316 is a little bit more spendy, but is smaller, better insulator, less loss, blah, 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 than your standard off-the-shelf rg-316 solid core, very thin strand count, shielded garbage. Now, we're not carrying any RF here. We're carrying a little bit of induced AC signal from our coupler on our meter. Our coupler, we're carrying the signal that comes from the pickup that drives this 30 UA meter movement forward. So I'm just saying, if you have to run, let's say in this situation, he's going to run 4 meters, a forward and a reflect and a forward and a reflect. Okay. Which would you rather have? A bundle of wire that you got to sneak and hide in a mobile that big, or a bundle of wire that's going to be that big? And it does the exact same job. Oh, it's super flexible. You can hide it in your vehicle. You never have to worry about it breaking. It's got 1,000,000 bend radiuses. Oh yeah, and it's fireproof. It's made of Teflon. If you can burn this, you've got other problems. Teflon does burn, but if you can get it to burn, you've got other problems. So he wanted 18-foot jumpers. We are going to provide him with 18-foot and 6-inch jumpers. By the time we're done, it's going to be 18 foot and like 2 inches. Because we got to strip some of this back. We're going to utilize the jacket. We're going to do some stuff to it. So it's going to like bing, bang, thank you, wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. That makes sense? We're going to do an assembly line process. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to strip our coax back, and we're going to put our reducers on. You're going to need a little bench vise. You're going to need a decent pair of strippers, some 60-40 solder, a decent soldering iron, a little bit of patience, and this will happen. All right, let's get set up and we'll show you what we're going to do next. So the very first step that we're going to do, and we're going to repeat this stripping process on both ends of the wire, but on the meter side we're going to make the leads a little bit longer. You're going to find your 14 gauge connector, your 14 gauge stripper, and your 14 gauge stripper is perfect for cutting away the insulation. On the coax end, you're going to strip off about 1.5 inches to 2 inches worth of jacket. This isn't science. Like, we're not, well, this is science, but we're not doing rocket surgery, okay? You're going to strip off about 2 inches worth of jacket. You're going to set this aside. Your next step that you're going to do is you're going to come back and you're just going to simply solder the connector. And I mean literally, because this is silver, you put the soldering iron here, you put a little bit of glob of solder on your soldering iron, and it'll wick itself right over to this wire. You're going to solder up about 1 inch of the jacket. Then from there, we strip it. So this center conductor, we're going to trim it off. But what we do is we take our connector, once again, our strippers, and we put the coax back in the 14 gauge wire, and we'll put it just like this. We'll go 14 gauge, and we'll go right over the solder joint. See that? We take the solder joint, we just twist it. Flip-flop it back and forth, and the solder will cause the jacket to cleave off perfectly smooth. Then from there, we come up about, I don't know, a couple 16ths of an inch, and we strip the center conductor away. Now, this is where our vise comes in, but let me show you how to set it up on the vise. We twist these together so they stay stuck together. We don't solder these yet. We take our reducer and we slide our reducer down until just the edge of our soldered shield is present. You want it almost perfectly smooth. And that's what we have set up over here. Now, like I was saying, I learned about this little trick from the guy that sells all the components out of New York. For a lot of years, he did not have a cheap copy of the adapter for the bird line section. He just had the OGs, the originals. Well, that's not business cost effective, right? So he figured out this PL259 reducer trick. I can't take claim for it. I'm just showing you how to set it up. Well, first thing we're going to do is we're going to heat up the reducer. So let's just lay this on the reducer. Oh, hopefully I can do this in reverse. Lay this on the reducer, and we're just going to let the solder flow over from the iron to the reducer. You see it bubbling? It's going to bubble, 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 bubble. Nope, and it just sucked it all down in the hole. Pull your soldering iron away and let this set up thoroughly. Okay? Now what we just did is on our reducer, we pre-tin the wire, the shield that's on the inside of this. The shield is exposed to about that much of the reducer. When we put the solder on the top, it is going to literally pull itself, the solder is going to pull itself down the jacket and fill up the entire inside of this reducer with solder and make this 100% soldered connection. That makes sense? It's really super simple. Here, let's do it one more time. Show you the setup process. Now I like to take the coax and set it through. We're going to adjust that till it's almost flat with the edge of the reducer. Let's grab our soldering iron. We'll heat up the fitting first, and then we're going to just add a little bit of solder to the iron and let it flow over to the fitting. When the fitting gets up to temperature, it'll wick the solder down into place. Now remember, you don't have to be in a hurry. This is Teflon-based coax. Boom, there it is. You can sit there and it'll bubble, 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 and it'll suck it down the hole. That's what we're wanting to do. And then obviously what we do is we come back and we trim this. So we come back and we strip this, just like so. So now what we do is we reach in here with our 18 gauge stripper and we trim it back, just like so. And then we twist all of our leads together so we don't have a big hairy mess. And then we got to let our fitting cool down. That make sense? Okay. So what we got here is a little piece of 16 gauge, and we use a little bit bigger eyelet on the ground side than we do on the positive side, and that's because of most of the aftermarket peak kits have an oversized connection on the ground nut. And using the same cleaving technique that we did before, we trim back our center conductor of coax, just like what we did on the meter end of the PL259 connector side of things. I'm going to show you how to do this from beginning to end here. I got to get done with this. So over here in the vise, as that's cooling down, we have our end product. We always leave our ground wire a little bit longer so that when we go to mount it on the back of the meter, it can sit just like so. Cool looking, right? Always solder your eyelets. Always use heat shrink down here at the joint. There's two ways to do this. You can peel back your braid and pull your center conductor out the side of the braid and blah, blah. It's not as neat as this. It just doesn't work out to be as clean. And this little bit of difference in the wire length, that doesn't make any difference at all. Really doesn't. So this is our end product right here. Little piece of 16 gauge wire, 2 eyelets, solder joint, and then marine grade heat shrink with epoxy in it to help support the joint. Here's the one that we just finished up. We'll slide this up. Heat this up, shrink it down. That one's done, so leave it alone. This one is also completed. So that one's done, that one's done. That's 3. So, once again, using the exact same techniques that we did before, first thing we're going to do is we're going to put our heat shrink on the coax. Heat shrink, get it out of the way. 16 gauge right there. A little 1/4 of an inch, press, 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 and press. Slide this off, just like that. Strip, 22 gauge wire. Then we tin this. We solder to here. You can do wrap, where you strip back the wire a little bit more than this. Wrap it, strip the wire back a little bit more than this, and then wrap it around the coax. But it's not going to hold it any better than what we just put together. It's really not. And of course, we always solder our eyelets. That way we make sure the eyelets don't ever fall off on the customer, right? So, that's soldered. Let that eyelet cool down. Little turds hold on to their heat for a long period of time. We just bring up our heat shrink, cover up our joint to help support it. Heat this up. And set it aside and let it cool off. Now, once this coax or the heat shrink gets solid or cools off, this becomes relatively stiff and rigid. It supports the shield joint that's here on the coax, which, because we've soldered to it, can have a chance to break if you don't support the joint. And it helps it support the ground lead, which is attached to the shield. So you got to put something on there to help support that joint. Well, that's that. That's how we build Bird 43 meter extensions. This is how, if you ever see meters are remoted in a mobile, this is how this works. They've taken a piece of coax. It doesn't have to be 316, but 316 makes a whole lot more sense once you start to think about it. You can make 316 work like I did in my mobile setup because I was really cramped on space. Sometimes that 90-degree bird connector is actually, it works in your favor. There is a way to solder into those and make those work as well. But for some people, it's a little bit easier to get this to thread on in a tight space than it is to get that little tiny collet to spin. So on that note, gentlemen, I appreciate you all tuning in. Big shout out to my Patreons. Big thank you to Siglent, to Excess Power, to MechMan Alternators, Bird, Coaxial Dynamics, and to all the YouTube viewers, I want to say thanks. I appreciate you. And we'll see you. Click, click. 14 gauge. Clip it down hard. Press, 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 and flex. Pull off our strippers. And off slides the jacket. Nice and clean cleaved joint. Into the reducer. Set the reducer up in the holder. Now, it is a little bit critical that we get this connector set up just right. We don't want to have too much of the jacket shoving up through the hole, because when we thread this up inside the PL259 connector, we don't want to have a lot of ground sticking up. Let's use a little bit smaller iron, which will take a little bit more time. So we heat up the fitting first. Flow the solder from the tip and just be patient. When the fitting comes up to the right temperature, it'll flow over to the fitting. Give it a little bit more schmoo. And over it goes, just like that. Doop, doop, doop. Get sucked down the hole, pull the iron off, let it cool down. All right. Now, my last example here, let's show you what I mean. Grab my soldering iron. Once again, We're just going to flow this from the iron over to the shield, just like that. We don't have to glob it on there or nothing. Just flow it over. Now we're going to let this get solid. Let this get cool to the point where we can touch it. Take our 14 gauge stripper, come up about 1/4 of an inch. On this side, you go front, back, side, side. Take off your stripper, slide off your jacket. Nice clean fitting. Slide this through. Set this up just like so. Hold and wait, hold and wait, hold and wait. There it goes. Poof, just like that. And we're done. Easy peasy, right? Now once this cools down, you don't want to work with this when this is hot in any way, shape, or form. You know, let this cool down. Then we can go ahead and we can strip it. We set it aside and we can move on to the next step. All right. So this is our next step, is to get to this finished product, because the way this works is it sits just like that. So what you got to do is, with a Dremel or a sander, you've got to cut down this connector. Now I want to show you how far to cut it down. I want to cut it down until it's even with these nipples, the little tits that are on the connector. I just take it over to the belt sander and go and sand it down until it's even with these nipples. Okay? So when you go and you backfill the connector, you're going to put a little tiny ball on the tip of the connector. And that's to help take up the slop between the fitting and the other fitting. And once you get this on, you see that little dimple that's at the top there? You get that dimple, we thread this down on, and you get this dimple from when you tighten it up. And now that connector ain't moving. Okay? So that was nice and round. Now we got ourselves a little dimple in that. A little dimple there. Okay. So let's go from completed to where we left off at. It's really important that you got your tips all twisted together. And of course, you're going to take the jacket off. So first you put your jacket over your connector in your reducer. Then you take your coax and thread it up through the coax connector, and then we're going to twist this down hand tight. Now, what I like to do is make sure that this shit is tight and tight. So we're going to take a pair of vice grips and we're going to grab onto this reducer on the bottom so it can't slide around. We're going to take a pair of pliers, we're going to grab onto this, and we're going to torque this puppy down. So we're good and we're tight. Okay. Now we take our flush cut zip tie cutters or wire dikes, flush cut, and we cut it off so it's flush with the tip. Let's get this over here center stage. Now we'll grab our slobbering iron. Let me hit the sponge so the slobbering iron's nice and clean for you all. I tell you, there's a couple different skills in life, and learning how to work around this camera and show what I want to show is a trick. Okay, so once again, solder to the iron, let it flow down in the hole. And then as you stop, let this get solid. Once again, solder to the iron, let it flow down in the hole. And then we put our little boop, our little nipple on top. See how easy that was? It's like 1, 2, 3, rock, paper, scissors. Now this is the time where you've got to make the decision. Do I need to side fill in these holes? And the answer to that question is, it's up to you. You have to get this connector so hot, and that's the reason that I use the Amphenol ones. You have to get this connector so hot to get the solder to flow through. not really worth it. If this connection and this connection are really super tight, it's not backing off. That, and it's soldered in here, right? Thread our jacket down. Let's make sure we can test fit this on here to where it's nice and tight. It's nice and tight. This inner fitting doesn't spin, so it's pressing against that inner pin on the connector nice and tight. And you want to test fit it each time. See? There's our little dimple right there. Okay, we'll do this one more time and show it to you again. Of course, jacket. Make sure our tits are all down and we have no flying loose hairs. Thread this through. Put that on there finger tight. Grab it up with a pair of vice grips. Just pliers, lightly apply pressure. Torque that down until it's tight. Back off our vice grips. Take our flush cut wire dikes, cut that off flush. Set that in the vice grip. And we're just using the smallest amount of pressure here, right here. Smallest amount of pressure on the coax to hold this in place. Soldering iron to the iron itself, bloop, pull away. Let that cool off, let the heat migrate around a little bit. Do it again, pull off, and we backfill. Bloop, until we have our little tiny nipple. That bubble's really important. Now, if this connector doesn't make really good contact over here, we just put it back on here. We put another little tiny drop of solder on the end of this until we get pressure. That's all we got to do. The main advantage to this is being able to have this bigger amount of journaled space. There's journaled space for us to be able to get our fingers onto. And tight. Can't spin this free, can't spin the reducer free, and the fitting's tight. And there's our dimple. Okay? On to the next step.